The monitoring station floated silently in the darkness of space, its sensors constantly scanning the void for any sign of danger. Inside, hundreds of aliens from dozens of different species worked at their stations, watching over the peaceful sectors of the galaxy. The station orbited Viridian Prime, one of the most beautiful worlds in known space, where the Galactic Council held their meetings and made decisions that affected trillions of lives. On this particular day, everything changed. A young Kethera named Theesca sat at her console, her three-fingered hands moving across the holographic display. The Kethera were a gentle species, tall and slender with pale blue skin that seemed to glow faintly in dim light. They were known across the galaxy for their art, their music, and their philosophy. They had never fought a war in their entire recorded history. Violence was foreign to them, something they read about in ancient texts but never experienced. The alarm that suddenly blared through the station made Theesca jump from her seat. Her large eyes widened as she read the incoming message. Her hands trembled as she forwarded it to the council chambers. Within minutes, the council room was filled with representatives from every major species in the galaxy. They stood on elevated platforms arranged in a circle, each platform holding delegates from different worlds. The Zentari, with their crystalline bodies that refracted light into rainbow patterns. The Morphians floating in containment fields because their gaseous forms couldn't survive in standard atmosphere. The Quinn, insectoid beings with 4 arms and compound eyes. Dozens of others all watching the holographic display at the center of the room. The message played for everyone to see and hear. This is Elder Council of Kethera Prime. We are under attack. The Vorzen swarm has entered our system. They have already consumed the outer colonies. Millions are dead. We have no military, no weapons, no way to fight. Please, anyone who can hear this, we need help. We are dying. The message ended, but the room remained silent. Everyone knew about the Vorzen swarm. They were nightmares made real. A parasitic species that moved from world to world like locusts. They consumed everything in their path, not just food and resources, but entire civilizations. They took the bodies of the dead and twisted them into more soldiers for their swarm. No species had ever successfully defended against a full Vorzen assault. The head counselor, an elderly Zentari whose body had turned deep purple with age, finally spoke. His voice echoed through the chamber with a crystalline quality. We must discuss our options. For hours they debated. Some wanted to send their fleets immediately. Others argued that their military forces were already stretched thin across the galaxy, dealing with pirates, border disputes, and other threats. If they pulled ships from those positions, other worlds might fall into chaos. The Morphian delegate's voice came through its translator, sounding like wind through metal pipes. The Kethera are 3 sectors away from the nearest military base. By the time our ships arrive, their world will have fallen. Then what do you suggest? Asked a Quinn representative, its mandibles clicking with agitation. That we simply let them die? Of course not, the Morphian replied. But we must be realistic about what we can accomplish. Theesca stood in the observation gallery, watching the debate with growing desperation. Those were her people dying down there. Her family, her friends, everyone she had ever known. And these powerful beings were talking about logistics and realistic expectations while her world burned. She made a decision that would change everything. Leaving the gallery, Theesca returned to her station in the monitoring center. She pulled up the communication protocols and started making changes. The distress signal was currently broadcasting on standard frequencies, the ones that all civilized species monitored. But there were other frequencies, lower bands that reached farther into space, bands that were forbidden because they reached into the dead zone, a region of the galaxy that all maps marked with warnings. The dead zone was a mystery. Ancient records suggested that it had once been home to advanced civilizations, but something had happened there thousands of years ago. Now it was silent, empty, dangerous. Ships that ventured too deep into it sometimes disappeared. The few that returned brought back stories of strange readings, impossible phenomena, and a sense of wrongness that permeated everything. The Council had declared the dead zone off limits centuries ago. No one went there. No one even talked about it much anymore. But Theesca was desperate. If there was even a chance that someone in the dead zone could hear their call for help, she had to try. Her fingers moved across the controls, adjusting frequencies and boosting signal strength. She rerouted power from non-essential systems to the communications array. Alarms started going off as the system registered her unauthorized access, but she ignored them. She had maybe 2 minutes before security locked her out. She hit the transmit button and sent the distress call, flooding into the dead zone on every frequency she could. Access, security arrived 90 seconds later, pulling her away from the console. The station commander, a stern Quinn named Vextor, stood over her with his compound eyes glittering with anger. "What have you done?" "I sent the distress signal into the dead zone," Theesca said, her voice steady despite her fear. "If there's anyone there, anyone at all, they'll hear it." Vextor's mandibles snapped shut with a sharp crack. "You've violated a dozen regulations. You could have endangered this entire station. The dead zone is forbidden for a reason." "My people are dying," Theesca said quietly. "I had to try something." They placed her in a holding cell while they decided what to do with her. She sat on the simple bench and waited, wondering if she had just made things worse. Maybe there was nothing in the dead zone. Maybe she had risked everything for nothing. 3 days passed. The reports from Kethera Prime grew worse by the hour. The Vorzen had established a foothold on the main continent. The death toll climbed into the hundreds of millions. The council continued to debate, but no help had arrived yet. On the 4th day, something changed. Vextor came to her cell, his usually composed demeanor shaken. "We received a response," he said. "From the dead zone." Theesca stood up so fast she almost lost her balance. "What did it say?" "Come with me." They walked quickly through the corridors to the communications center. Every screen showed the same message, text only, translated by the computer into multiple languages. The original language was listed as unknown, but the translation was clear enough. Coordinates received. "Help is coming. Stand by. That's all?" Theesca asked. "That's all," Vextor confirmed. "But look at this." He pulled up another display showing the signal analysis. "The transmission technology is primitive compared to ours, but incredibly powerful. The encoding method is something we've never seen before. And the language?" He paused. The computer found partial matches in the historical archives. Very old records from before the council was formed. "What species sent it?" Theesca asked. "Unknown. But there's a reference in the ancient texts. A species that was marked as dangerous. A warning that they should never be contacted." Vextor's voice dropped lower. "The file designation is Humanity Class 5 Predator Species Origin, Sol System 3rd Planet." The words sent a chill through Theesca's body. In galactic classification, Class 5 was the highest level of predator designation. Most species were Class 1 or 2, omnivores or herbivores with some defensive capabilities. Class 3 predators were rare and usually avoided. Class 4 predators were considered extremely dangerous. There were only 3 species in the entire galactic record classified as Class 5. All 3 were extinct, having destroyed themselves in wars before they achieved space travel. "They're extinct," Theesca said. "The file must be wrong." "Perhaps," Vextor said. "Or perhaps they're not extinct. Perhaps they've been in the dead zone all this time." The council called an emergency session. They stood in their circle again, but now there was fear in the air mixing with the desperation. The message from the dead zone played over and over. "We cannot allow a Class 5 predator species to enter council space," said the Zentari head counselor. "The danger is too great." "The Kethera are dying right now," argued a small delegate from the preen species, her feathers ruffling with emotion. "If these humans can help them, we should let them try." "And if they decide to stay?" asked the Morphean. "If they decide that our space looks inviting, we would have invited wolves into the flock." The debate raged for hours, but ultimately, it didn't matter what the council decided. On the 6th day after Theesca sent her message, 3 ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Kethera space. They appeared on every sensor in the system simultaneously, impossible to miss. The ships were like nothing anyone had ever seen before. They weren't elegant curves or organic shapes like most galactic vessels. They were angular, brutal, covered in armor plating and weapon batteries. They looked like they had been designed for one purpose only: war. The lead ship broadcast a simple message in the same unknown language as before, quickly translated by the computers. "This is Captain Lisa Grant of the United Human Starship Retribution. We received your distress call. We're here to help. Transmit enemy position and strength. We'll take it from here." The council chamber had never been so crowded. Every species with representation demanded to be present when the humans arrived. They wanted to see these legendary predators, these beings from the dead zone who had responded to the distress call with such frightening confidence. Theesca stood in the observation gallery again, her hands gripping the railing so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Below her, the council members waited in tense silence. 3 human ships had arrived at the station an hour ago. 1 remained outside, maintaining a defensive position. The other 2 had docked, and now their crews were coming aboard. The main doors opened with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Captain Lisa Grant walked through first, and the entire chamber fell silent. She was tall for her species, perhaps 6 feet in human measurements, with dark hair pulled back in a tight style that emphasized the angular lines of her face. But it was her eyes that caught everyone's attention. They were forward-facing, set deep under a prominent brow, and they moved constantly, scanning everything, assessing, calculating. Predator's eyes. Behind her came Commander Jake Morrison, shorter and broader, with scars visible on his hands and neck. Then came 4 others, all wearing dark blue uniforms that seemed designed for function rather than appearance. Each one of them moved with the same fluid grace, the same constant awareness. They walked like hunters, weight balanced, ready to react to threats in an instant. The head counselor stepped forward, his crystalline body refracting the chamber's light into nervous patterns. Captain Grant, welcome to Viridian Prime. I am Counselor Vexthar. We appreciate your response to the distress call, but we must discuss protocols before any military action can be taken. Grant stopped a few feet from the counselor. Her expression didn't change. How long will these discussions take? Several days at minimum. We must establish rules of engagement, coordinate with our own military forces, ensure that proper procedures are followed. The Kethera don't have several days, Grant said flatly. According to our scans, the Vorzen have already consumed 40% of their main population centers. At their current rate of advance, the planet will be completely overrun in 72 hours. Nevertheless, there are procedures that must be followed. We cannot simply allow unknown military forces to operate in Council space without proper oversight. Grant's jaw tightened slightly. It was a small movement, but every alien in the room noticed it. There was something dangerous in that tiny display of tension. Let me be very clear, Counselor. We came here because someone asked for help. We didn't come for debates or committee meetings. We came to fight. Morrison stepped forward, his voice calmer but no less firm. Perhaps we could provide you with our tactical assessment while these discussions continue. That way you'll understand what we're dealing with. Vexthar hesitated, then nodded. Very well. Please proceed. Morrison activated a holographic display from a device on his wrist. The image showed the Kethera system in detail, with thousands of red dots swarming around the main planet. The Vorzen have committed approximately 50,000 bioships to this assault. Their ground forces number in the hundreds of millions. They've established 3 primary hive nodes on the surface, here, and here. The council members studied the display with growing horror. Those numbers were far worse than their own intelligence had suggested. How do you propose to fight such overwhelming numbers? Asked the Morphean delegate. Grant smiled, but there was nothing friendly in the expression. The same way we've always fought. We hit them harder than they hit us. But surely you're outnumbered hundreds to 1, said a preen representative. We're used to that, Morrison said. Humans have been outnumbered in every major conflict in our history. We learned to compensate. Theesca found herself moving down from the observation gallery, drawn by curiosity and desperation. She needed to know if these beings could really save her people. As she approached, Grant's eyes locked onto her immediately. Those predator eyes tracked her movement across the chamber. You're Kethera, Grant said. It wasn't a question. Yes, my name is Theesca. I sent the distress signal into the dead zone. Something in Grant's expression softened slightly. You saved your species by doing that. It took courage to reach out to the unknown. Can you really help us? Theesca asked quietly. Can you stop the Vorzen? Yes, Grant said with absolute certainty. We can stop them. We will stop them. How can you be so sure? Morrison answered this time. Because we've fought things like the Vorzen before. Different names, different forms, but the same basic concept. Overwhelming swarms that rely on numbers and shock tactics. We know how to break them. Vexthar interrupted. Captain Grant, I must insist that you wait for proper authorization before taking any military action. The Council needs time to evaluate the situation and make an informed decision. Grant turned to face the counselor fully. When she spoke, her voice was cold enough to freeze hydrogen. Counselor, with all due respect, we didn't travel across the galaxy to watch a committee debate while people die. We're moving to engage the Vorzen in 6 hours. You can authorize it or you can try to stop us. But I should warn you, trying to stop us would be a mistake. Is that a threat? Vexthar demanded, his body flashing with agitated colors. It's a fact, Grant replied calmly. We came here to help. That's what we're going to do. Whether you want us to or not. The chamber erupted in chaos. Half the delegates were shouting at Grant, demanding that she respect council authority. The other half were arguing among themselves about what should be done. But the humans stood perfectly still in the center of the storm, unmoved by the uproar around them. Theesca watched them and saw something that chilled her blood. These humans weren't afraid of the council's anger. They weren't intimidated by being outnumbered or surrounded by dozens of alien species. They stood there calmly, confidently, like they knew exactly how dangerous they were and didn't care who knew it too. After several minutes of chaos, Vexthar finally restored order. Captain Grant, I cannot authorize military action without a full council vote. That will take at least 2 days. Then we'll proceed without authorization, Grant said. She turned to leave, her crew falling into formation behind her. If you do this, you'll be violating council space, Vexthar called after her. Grant stopped at the doorway and looked back. Counselor, every second you spend arguing is another 100 Kethera dead. I've got a job to do and I'm going to do it. You can file whatever complaints you want afterward, assuming there's anyone left alive to file them with. She left and her crew followed. The doors closed behind them with a final hiss. The council chamber dissolved into arguments again. Some delegates wanted to send their own ships to intercept the humans. Others argued that would be suicide. Still others suggested they should just let the humans try and hope they failed quickly, so the council could maintain some appearance of authority. Theesca slipped out of the chamber and ran after the humans. She found them in the docking bay, preparing to return to their ships. Captain Grant? Grant turned, one eyebrow raised slightly. Yes, I want to come with you. To Kethera Prime. Those are my people down there. I need to be there. It's going to be dangerous, Morrison warned. Very dangerous. We're going into a combat zone. I don't care, Theesca said firmly. I sent that distress signal. I called you here. I need to see this through. Grant studied her for a long moment, those predator eyes seeming to look straight through her. Finally, she nodded. All right. But you follow orders, you stay out of the way, and you do exactly what we tell you. Understood? Understood. Welcome aboard the Retribution. The trip to the human ship was short but revealing. Theesca observed everything, trying to understand these strange beings who had answered her call. The interior of their ship was different from any vessel she'd ever seen. Everything was angular, efficient, designed for purpose rather than comfort. The corridors were wide enough for rapid movement. The walls were covered with what looked like armored plating, and everywhere she looked there were weapons. Not just the ship's main armaments, but personal weapons mounted at regular intervals along the walls, fire extinguishers that doubled as clubs, emergency tools that could clearly be used as improvised weapons in a fight. You prepare for battle even on your own ships, she observed. Morrison, walking beside her, nodded. We prepare for everything. Hope for the best, plan for the worst. It's kept us alive this long. They reached the bridge and Theesca got her first look at human military operations. The room was filled with crew members, each focused intently on their stations. Holographic displays showed tactical data, ship status, weapon readiness. Everything moved with practiced efficiency. Grant took her position in the command chair. Status report. All systems green, reported a woman at the tactical station. Weapons charged and ready. The other 2 ships are in formation. Good. Helm. Set course for Kethera Prime. Maximum combat speed. Aye, Captain. The ship lurched slightly as it accelerated. On the main view screen, Theesca could see the other 2 human vessels moving into flanking positions. They looked like arrows aimed at a target, deadly and precise. Captain, called out another crew member from the communications. The 3 human warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kethera system, and every sensor on every ship immediately registered the horror that waited for them. Thousands of Vorzen bioships filled the space around Kethera Prime like a swarm of angry insects. They were living vessels, grown rather than built, with pulsing organic hulls and weapon ports that leaked caustic fluids into the void. Each one was unique, twisted into disturbing shapes by the Vorzen hive mind. Some looked like massive insects with wings made of bone and chitin. Others resembled deep-sea creatures, all tentacles and gaping mouths. All of them were designed for one purpose, to consume and destroy. On the planet's surface, the situation was even worse. Entire continents glowed red on the thermal scans, burning from Vorzen attacks. Millions of the parasitic drones swarmed across the landscape, consuming everything organic they encountered and converting it into more soldiers for their endless army. Theesca stood on the bridge of the Retribution, staring at the view screen in horror. "There are so many," she whispered. "How can you possibly fight all of them?" Captain Lisa Grant sat in her command chair, studying the tactical displays with calm focus. If she was intimidated by the overwhelming numbers, she didn't show it. "We don't have to fight all of them," she said. "We just have to break their coordination. Kill the queen and the swarm collapses." "The Vorzen don't have queens," Theesca said. "They're a hive mind. Every drone is connected to every other drone." "Then we break the hive," Grant replied simply. She tapped commands into her chair's armrest. "All ships, this is Grant. Execute Battle Plan Alpha. Target the hive nodes on the surface first. We clear the planet, then we deal with the fleet." "Captain," called out Lieutenant Pete Crawford from the tactical station. "The Vorzen fleet is moving to intercept. 20,000 bioships inbound, closing fast." "Good," Grant said with a cold smile. "That means they know we're dangerous. Weapons, arm all missile batteries. Target the largest concentrations. Fire when ready." "Aye, Captain." Firing. The Retribution shuddered as hundreds of missiles launched simultaneously from concealed bays along its hull. The other two human ships did the same, filling space with a storm of metal and explosives. The missiles weren't like the energy weapons that most galactic species used. They were solid objects accelerated to tremendous speeds, each one carrying enough explosive force to vaporize a small building. The Vorzen bioships tried to evade, but they were too slow. The missiles slammed into them by the dozens, and space lit up with brilliant explosions. In the first salvo alone, over 300 Vorzen vessels were destroyed, but 300 out of 20,000 wasn't enough. The swarm kept coming, absorbing the losses without slowing down. They returned fire with bioweapons, launching organic projectiles that writhed and pulsed with sickly bioluminescence. "Evasive maneuvers," Grant ordered. "Don't let those things touch us. If Vorzen biomatter gets on the hull, it'll start eating through the armor." The Retribution rolled and accelerated, moving with an agility that shouldn't have been possible for a ship its size. The other human vessels did the same, weaving through the incoming fire with practiced precision. Most of the Vorzen projectiles missed. The few that connected splashed harmlessly against energy shields that flared bright blue on impact. "Shields holding at 90%, reported a crew member from the engineering station. "Railguns. Target their propulsion systems," Grant commanded. "Slow them down." New weapons emerged from the Retribution's hull. These were different from the missiles, long barrels that crackled with electromagnetic energy. When they fired, there was no visible projectile, just a brief distortion in space, and then Vorzen bioships started exploding as tungsten rounds traveling at significant fractions of light speed tore through their organic hulls. Commander Jake Morrison stood beside Grant's chair, coordinating the battle. "We're taking out about 50 vessels per minute, Captain. At this rate, we'll clear the immediate area in 6 hours." "Not fast enough," Grant said. "The planet doesn't have 6 hours. Launch the drop pods." Morrison nodded and tapped his communicator. "All Marine units, this is Morrison. You are authorized for immediate deployment. Get down there and secure the hive nodes." Deep in the Retribution's cargo bay, Lieutenant Amy Walsh finished checking her armor seals. Around her, 200 Marines prepared for combat in grim silence. Each one wore powered armor, bulky suits of advanced composite materials that enhanced strength, provided protection, and integrated weapon systems directly into the user's nervous system. "Listen up," Walsh called out, her voice amplified through the external speakers. "We've got 3 hive nodes on the surface. Alpha Team takes the northern node. Bravo Team takes the eastern node. Charlie Team takes the southern node. Our job is simple. Get in, destroy the nodes, and kill everything that tries to stop us." She sealed her helmet and felt the armor systems come fully online. Heads-up displays appeared in her vision, showing tactical data, weapon status, and vital signs for every Marine in her unit. Drop pods launching in 30 seconds. Check your gear one last time. The Marines moved with efficient speed, performing final equipment checks. These were veterans, men and women who had fought in dozens of battles across human space. They knew what was coming and they were ready for it. The floor beneath them opened, revealing the launch tubes. Each Marine stepped into a drop pod, a one-person vehicle designed to survive atmospheric entry and deliver its passenger directly into a combat zone. The pods were cramped, uncomfortable, and had a reputation for rough landings. The Marines called them coffins as a dark joke. Walsh climbed into her pod and felt the harness lock around her armored body. All units sound off. One by one, the Marines reported ready. 200 voices confirming they were prepared to dive into hell. "Drop pods away," came Morrison's voice over the comm. The pods launched, accelerating toward the planet's surface with brutal force. Walsh felt the G-forces pressing her deep into the harness despite the armor's compensation systems. Through the small viewport, she could see the other pods around her, all of them trailing fire as they hit the atmosphere. The Vorzen noticed the pods immediately. Bioships broke off from the main swarm to intercept, firing their organic weapons at the falling Marines. Some pods were hit, spinning off course or exploding in midair, but most made it through, protected by ablative heat shields and electronic countermeasures. Walsh's pod slammed into the ground with an impact that would have killed an unarmored human. Her combat suit absorbed most of the shock, but she still felt her teeth rattle. The pod's front panel blew away explosively, and she was out and moving before the debris hit the ground. Around her, the other Marines were emerging from their pods, forming up into combat formations with practice speed. The landscape was a nightmare. What had once been a beautiful city full of Kethera architecture was now a twisted hellscape of organic corruption. Vorzen biomass covered everything, pulsing and writhing like the flesh of some vast creature. Buildings had been partially consumed, their walls covered in the same corrupting material. And everywhere, there were drones. The Vorzen foot soldiers came at them in a massive wave, thousands of twisted creatures that had once been various species but were now just shells animated by the hive mind. Some walked on 2 legs, others on 4 or 6. Some had weapons grafted onto their bodies, organic cannons that fired acidic projectiles. All of them moved with the same mindless purpose: destroy the invaders, contact. Walsh shouted, "Open fire!" The Marines responded immediately. Their weapons were a mixture of technologies, combining conventional firearms with more exotic systems. Assault rifles spat out armor-piercing rounds at tremendous rates of fire. Plasma casters sent superheated bolts into the swarm. Grenade launchers lobbed explosives that detonated with devastating effect. The Vorzen drones ran straight into the fire, absorbing casualties that would have broken any normal army. But for every drone that fell, 2 more took its place. They climbed over the bodies of their dead without hesitation, driven forward by the hive mind's single-minded determination. "They just keep coming," shouted one Marine, a young man named Corporal Danny White. "Then we keep killing them," Walsh shouted back. She triggered her armor's integrated flamethrower, sending a stream of burning chemicals into the approaching horde. The drones caught fire but didn't stop, continuing their advance even as their corrupted flesh burned away. This was the kind of fighting that the peaceful galactic species couldn't comprehend. This was warfare at its most brutal and primitive, stripped of all the civilized conventions and reduced to simple survival. Kill or be killed. No quarter asked, none given, and the humans were very good at it. The Marines advanced through the city in disciplined formation, using buildings for cover, coordinating fire, covering each other's movements. They had done this before, not against the Vorzen specifically, but against countless other enemies on countless other worlds. The tactics were universal. The discipline was ingrained. The will to survive and win was absolute. Walsh reached the hive node first, a massive pulsing structure that had grown from the remains of what looked like it had been a government. 3 weeks after the battle, Kethera Prime was slowly returning to life. The Vorzen corruption had been burned away, leaving scars that would take years to heal, but the planet was free. Survivors emerged from their shelters, blinking in sunlight they thought they'd never see again. The death toll was staggering. Nearly 2 billion Kethera had died, but 3 billion had survived. Without the humans, all 5 billion would have been lost. Theesca walked through the temporary human base that had been established outside what remained of the capital city. The base was a stark contrast to Kethera architecture, where her people built with flowing curves and artistic expression. the humans built with right angles and practical efficiency. Every structure served a clear purpose. Nothing was wasted on decoration. She was looking for Sergeant Kyle Peters, one of the Marines who had fought in the ground campaign. Over the past weeks, she had gotten to know several of the humans, trying to understand these strange beings who could switch so easily between deadly violence and gentle compassion. She found Peters in the recreation area, a simple tent where off-duty soldiers could relax. He was sitting at a table looking at a small device that displayed holographic images. As she approached, she could see the images were of a human family, a woman with kind eyes, 2 small children, and a 4-legged creature with fur. "Is that your family?" Theesca asked. Peters looked up and smiled. It was a genuine expression, warm and open, nothing like the cold efficiency she'd seen in his eyes during combat. "Yeah, that's my wife, Rachel. The kids are Ben and Sophie. And that's Max, our dog." "Dog?" "A domesticated animal. Descended from predators called wolves, but we bred them to be companions. Max is basically another member of the family." Peters gazed at the image with obvious affection. "I miss them. Been away from home for 8 months now." Theesca sat down across from him, studying this warrior who was also a father and husband. "How do you do it? How do you fight the way you do? Kill with such efficiency and then return to being a family man?" Peters thought about the question for a moment, his fingers absently tracing the edge of his holographic display. "It's not easy. But you have to understand, we don't fight because we love violence. We fight to protect the things we love. Every Vorzen drone I killed was one that couldn't hurt my family, couldn't threaten other families like mine. The violence isn't the point, the protection is." "But you're so good at it," Theesca said. "The violence, I mean. You move through combat like it's natural to you." "It is natural to us," Peters admitted. "Humans evolved as hunters, as predators. Our bodies are designed for endurance and pursuit. Our minds are wired for strategic thinking and pattern recognition. We can track prey for days, coordinate complex group tactics, and adapt to changing situations faster than most species. Those same traits that made us successful hunters on Earth make us effective soldiers in space." He pulled up another image, this one showing a lush green landscape with strange plants and a bright sun. "This is Earth, our homeworld. It looks beautiful, right? Peaceful?" Theesca nodded. "It did look beautiful, covered in vegetation and water. It tried to kill us constantly." Peters continued. "The weather could change from pleasant to deadly in hours. Animals that could tear us apart with claws or teeth or poison. Diseases that could wipe out entire populations. Other humans competing for the same resources. Earth was a paradise, but it was also a testing ground. Every generation, the ones who survived were the ones who could fight, who could adapt, who could overcome." "That sounds terrible," Theesca said softly. "It made us who we are. Strong, stubborn, survivors." Peters closed the holographic display, but it also taught us the value of working together, of protecting each other. Humans are social creatures. We form bonds, create communities, care for our young and our elderly. We're capable of tremendous compassion. The same instinct that makes us fight to protect also makes us help those in need. Lieutenant Amy Walsh joined them, carrying a container of what humans called coffee, a stimulant beverage they seemed to consume in large quantities. She sat down with a tired sigh. "Talking about Earth?" "Trying to help Theesca understand humans," Peters said. Walsh laughed, but it was a weary sound. "Good luck with that. We barely understand ourselves sometimes." She took a long drink of her coffee, then looked at Theesca. "What do you want to know?" "How can you be medics and soldiers at the same time?" Theesca asked. "I've watched you treat wounded Kethera with such care, working for hours to save lives. But I also saw you fight during the battle. You killed dozens of Vorzen drones without hesitation." Walsh set down her coffee and met Theesca's eyes. "Because life is precious. Every life. When I kill, it's to protect lives. When I heal, it's for the same reason. They're not contradictory actions. They're 2 sides of the same coin. I saw you develop new medical techniques to help our people," Theesca continued. "You stayed awake for 3 days straight to save those children who were infected with Vorzen spores." "They were children," Walsh said simply. "What else was I going to do? Let them die? Not while I had breath in my body and knowledge in my head. But why? They're not your species, not your responsibility." Walsh was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "There's a saying on Earth. We who have the power to act have the responsibility to act. I had the medical knowledge and the ability to help. That made it my responsibility. Simple as that. Over the following weeks, Theesca spent time with many different humans learning about their culture and their nature. She met engineers who could build functional shelters from scrap materials, showing the same creative problem-solving they used in combat. She met pilots who flew with reckless courage one moment and played gentle music on strange instruments the next. She met soldiers who could strip and reassemble weapons blindfolded, but who also spent their free time reading poetry or creating art. The humans were a contradiction, but it was a contradiction that made sense once she understood it. They were predators who had chosen to be more than just hunters. They were warriors who fought to protect peace. They were capable of terrible violence, but only used it in service of something greater. One evening, she was invited to dinner with Captain Grant and Commander Morrison in the captain's quarters, aboard the Retribution. The ship was still undergoing repairs in orbit, but it remained the command center for human operations in the system. The quarters were sparse but personal. Grant had a few items on display: a photo of a woman with the same intense eyes as the captain, several books with worn covers, and a strange object that Morrison explained was a chess set, a strategy game from Earth. They ate simple food, military rations that the humans seemed to find barely acceptable, but ate without complaint. During the meal, Theesca finally asked the question that had been bothering her since the battle ended. "Why are you so good at war? I've read the reports, studied the recordings of the battle. You fought with a level of coordination and efficiency that seems impossible. Every human knew what to do without being told. You adapted to situations in real time. You never panicked, never broke formation, never surrendered even when the odds were against you. How?" Grant set down her fork and leaned back in her chair. "Because we've had a lot of practice." "Too much practice, really?" "I don't understand," Morrison jumped in. "Humans have been fighting wars for our entire recorded history. We fought over resources, territory, ideology, religion, and sometimes just because we couldn't figure out how to stop fighting. It's not something we're proud of, but it's our history. We fought with sticks and stones," Grant continued, "then with swords and spears, then with guns and cannons, then with aircraft and tanks, then with nuclear weapons that could destroy entire cities in seconds. We've experienced every type of warfare imaginable, and we've learned from all of it. We also nearly destroyed ourselves," Morrison added grimly, "several times. We came within minutes of global nuclear war more than once. We've seen what happens when war gets out of control, when the violence becomes the goal instead of the means." "So we learned control," Grant said. "We learned discipline. We learned rules of engagement and laws of war. We learned how to be warriors without being monsters. It took us centuries and cost us millions of lives, but we learned." Theesca was quiet, processing this information. "So all that efficiency, all that deadly capability, it comes from learning how to kill each other?" "Yes and no," Grant replied. "We learned the tactics and technology from fighting each other. But the discipline, the restraint, the ability to stop fighting when the objective is achieved, that came from wisdom gained through terrible mistakes. We know what happens when war becomes unlimited. We've seen it. We've lived it. And we've sworn never to let it happen again." "But you're still so dangerous," Theesca said. "The Council is terrified of you. Half of them want to ban humans from Council space permanently. They think you'll eventually turn on us, use your military power to conquer instead of protect." Morrison sighed. "We expected that reaction. Fear is natural when you encounter something more powerful than yourself, especially when that power is wrapped in the form of predators." "What can we do to prove we're not a threat?" Theesca asked. The Galactic Council chamber was packed with more delegates than it had held in centuries. Representatives from every species in known space had come to witness this historic session. At the center of the chamber, standing on a platform normally reserved for witnesses, was Ambassador Patricia Stone, humanity's representative to the Council. Stone was a former intelligence officer, a woman in her late 50s with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She stood perfectly still as the council members argued around her, their voices echoing through the vast chamber. Some wanted humanity banned from council space, others wanted formal alliances. A few brave souls even suggested integrating human military forces into the council's defense structure. The debate had been going on for 3 hours, and Stone had said nothing yet. She simply waited, listening, analyzing, understanding the political currents swirling around her. Finally, Counselor Vexithar called for order. The crystalline being's body flashed with authoritative colors as he addressed the chamber. We have heard many arguments today, both for and against human integration into galactic society. Now we will hear from the humans themselves. Ambassador Stone, please address the council. Stone stepped forward, her movements measured and confident. When she spoke, her voice carried clearly through the chamber without being loud. Honorable council members, I've listened to your concerns. I understand your fear. You look at humanity and see predators, beings designed by evolution to hunt and kill. You're right to be cautious. That's a survival instinct, and survival instincts should be respected. She paused, letting her words sink in. But I want you to understand something about humanity. Yes, we are predators. Yes, we are dangerous. But we are also capable of choice. Every human who fought at Kethera Prime chose to be there. They chose to risk their lives for strangers. They chose to follow rules of engagement even when breaking them might have been easier. They chose to stop fighting when the battle was won, rather than continuing to destroy. A Morphean delegate interrupted, its voice whistling through its translator. Choice is easy when the outcome benefits you. How do we know you won't choose violence when it serves your interests? You don't, Stone replied honestly. You can't know that about any species, including your own. The question isn't whether we might choose violence. The question is whether we've demonstrated the wisdom to choose violence only when necessary. I believe our actions at Kethera Prime speak to that. One action doesn't establish a pattern, said a Zentari counselor. You're right, Stone agreed, which is why we're proposing a trial period. Allow humanity to establish embassies in council space. Allow us to participate in defense agreements on a voluntary basis. If we prove untrustworthy, you can always revoke our access. But if we prove ourselves, then we can discuss full integration. The debate continued for several more hours, but eventually, a vote was called. The result was narrow, but it was enough. Humanity would be granted provisional status in the Galactic Council, with full membership to be reconsidered in 5 years based on their conduct. Stone allowed herself a small smile as the vote was announced. It was a beginning, but while the politicians debated, events across the galaxy were moving faster than laws and treaties could keep up with. 3 months after the vote, a Vorzen revenge fleet assembled in deep space, far from any monitored systems. The hive mind had been damaged by the loss at Kethera Prime, but not destroyed. Now it was angry, and it had decided to strike at the beings who had hurt it most, the humans. The Vorzen fleet numbered in the tens of thousands of bioships, the largest force they had ever assembled. Their target was Earth itself, the human homeworld. They would consume it completely, leaving nothing but dead rock and twisted organic matter. They emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system, ready to sweep through the human defenses and begin their revenge. What they found waiting for them was something they had never encountered before. Earth's actual military strength. The expeditionary force that had saved Kethera Prime was tiny compared to Earth's true defensive capabilities. Humanity had spent centuries preparing for exactly this scenario, a hostile force attacking their homeworld. Every nightmare scenario had been planned for, every contingency covered. The Vorzen fleet found itself facing a defensive grid that made the Retribution look like a toy. Thousands of automated weapons platforms, each one more powerful than a full warship. Orbital defense stations with energy weapons that could cut through bioships like tissue paper. Minefields that extended for millions of kilometers. And behind all of that, Earth's actual fleet. Hundreds of warships that dwarfed the 3 vessels that had fought at Kethera Prime. Admiral Frank Harrison commanded the defense from the orbital station Unity, watching as the Vorzen fleet advanced into the kill zone. He was an old man, with more gray hair than black and scars that told stories of a long military career. He had fought in the colony wars, the pirate conflicts, and the border skirmishes that had defined humanity's expansion into space. He knew war better than most people knew peace. All stations report ready. Admiral, said his tactical officer, Commander Julia Grant, the captain's younger sister. Hold fire until they're fully committed, Harrison ordered. I want them deep in the grid before we light them up. The Vorzen fleet continued forward, confident in their overwhelming numbers. They had destroyed thousands of civilizations. Earth would be just another conquest, another meal for their endless hunger. They were wrong. When Harrison gave the order to fire, space lit up with more firepower than the Vorzen hive mind could process. The automated platforms opened up first, thousands of railguns and missile batteries firing in perfect synchronization. The orbital stations followed, their main guns carving burning paths through the bioship formations. Then the fleet engaged, launching strike craft and firing weapon systems that the Vorzen had never seen before. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Vorzen fleet was completely destroyed, not scattered or driven off, but annihilated. Thousands of bioships reduced to drifting debris and dying organic matter, and Earth's defenses had barely been tested. The hive mind, already damaged from previous defeats, finally fractured beyond repair. Without central coordination, the remaining Vorzen scattered across the galaxy, breaking into individual swarms that could be dealt with by local forces. The threat that had plagued the galaxy for millennia was finally, truly broken. News of Earth's victory spread through Council space faster than light. The species who had debated whether humanity was too dangerous suddenly had proof of just how dangerous they were. But they also had proof that humanity could have conquered the galaxy if they wanted to. Earth's military strength was revealed to be far beyond what anyone had imagined. And yet, humanity didn't conquer anyone. The weeks following the battle saw frantic diplomatic activity. Species that had opposed human integration suddenly wanted defense pacts. Those who had supported humanity felt vindicated. And slowly, carefully, a new structure began to form. The Mutual Defense Coalition was established 6 months after the Battle of Earth. 5 species signed the founding agreement. Humanity, the Kethera, the Preen, the Andali, and the Torvax. The terms were simple. The peaceful species would provide resources, technology sharing, and economic cooperation. Humanity would provide military training, defense support, and rapid response to threats. Sergeant Kyle Peters found himself reassigned from active combat duty to training instructor. He stood in a facility on Kethera Prime, facing a class of 30 Kethera volunteers who had signed up to learn basic combat skills. They looked nervous, their large eyes darting around the training room as if expecting danger to appear at any moment. "I know this is new for you," Peter said, his voice gentle but firm. "Your species has never needed soldiers before, but the galaxy isn't always safe, and being able to defend yourself is important. I'm not here to turn you into human Marines. I'm here to teach you how to survive, how to protect your families and your world." One of the Kethera raised a 3-fingered hand. "Will we become like you? Will learning to fight change who we are?" Peters considered the question seriously. "Learning to fight doesn't make you violent. It makes you capable. What you do with that capability is up to you. Humans have been warriors for thousands of years, but we're also artists, scientists, parents, friends. The violence doesn't define us. Our choices define us." Over the following months, he worked with the Kethera recruits, teaching them basic combat tactics, weapons handling, and most importantly, discipline. They would never be natural warriors, but they learned quickly, bringing their own strengths to the training. Their pattern recognition was excellent, allowing them to spot tactical opportunities that even Peters missed sometimes. Their teamwork was instinctive, honed by millions of years of evolution as a social species. By the end of their training, the Kethera volunteers weren't human Marines, but they were capable defenders. They could protect their homes, evacuate civilians during emergencies, and buy time for help to arrive if needed. It was enough. Similar programs started on other coalition worlds. Humans became military advisors, trainers, and peacekeepers. They didn't impose their culture or their methods. They adapted their teaching to each species,